Hey guys, and welcome to Anchor to Truth. Today we are diving into chapter 47 in the book of Jubilees. So let's get started.
All right, guys, let's do it. Verse 1. And in the 7th week, in the 7th year, in the 47th Jubilee, thy father went forth from the land of Canaan, and thou wast born in the 4th week, in the 6th year thereof, in the 48th Jubilee. This was a time of tribulation on the children of Israel. And Pharaoh, king of Egypt, issued a command regarding them that they should cast all their male children which were born into the river. And they cast them in for 7 months until the day that thou wast born. And thy mother hid thee for 3 months, and they told regarding her. And she made an ark for thee, and covered it with pitch and asphalt, and placed it in the flags on the bank of the river. And she placed thee in 7 days, and thy mother came by night and suckled thee. And by day Miriam, thy sister, guarded thee from the birds. And in those days Theramuth, the daughter of Pharaoh, came to bathe in the river, and she heard thy voice crying. And she told her maidens to bring thee forth, and they brought thee unto her. And she took thee out of the ark, and she had compassion on thee.
Okay, so, one of the things I've always questioned here is it never really made sense to me, right? The command was to throw all the children in the river, right? But then they're going to take one out of the river and, keep it for themselves. How did this one child? I don't know. What did they just look at this one and go, "Okay, this one's from a smart family. We said throw them in the river. We didn't say they couldn't be in a little boat, So this is going to be a smart child. Let's keep this one." I mean, I don't know. What? Why did they keep the child? Why didn't they say, "Oh, this one they're trying to get away. Let's toss this one out." I don't know. Maybe obviously the father probably put some compassion on their heart or something. I don't know, but it just never really made sense to me. Why? The people who are saying get rid of the children decide to keep a child.
No, that's a great question, and it's funny that it's easy to kind of make that connection because I've always the story is just kind of weird. I mean, when you really look at it, like who's putting
Mm-hmm.
babies in a basket, and then it's just like, did it float down the river? And no, it just kind of set in one spot, and then you had to keep the birds off. I mean, like this baby truly was like out there. This wasn't like a in a covered shelter and protected from the rain and the elements. It's just out in the sticks in the middle of in the middle of a water. That's crazy already. But to your point, I think when we look at it, the warriors, the people who are carrying this out, they were out on a separate mission. So like the people inside the courts and the people inside, like that are eating the grapes and having the fan leaf on them and all that stuff, they're not dealing with any of this stuff. They're not interacting with these kids. They're not interacting with the Hebrews and going out there and saying, "Hey, give me your child out of your actual hand and I'm going to put it in the water." This was another person. So I think when you see Pharaoh's daughter come out, she's like, I didn't have any idea. This was not a reality to me. So all I saw was a baby, and I'm going to have compassion on the baby. And then, of course, you have daddy's daughter is going to show up. Daddy, can I have it, please? Like I already said no to the puppy and to the cat, but well, that's the baby. So I think it's just one of those. She and Pharaoh and everybody else, they're probably in their ivory tower. They're not really experiencing
Mm-hmm.
this all day, every day. So, like, yeah, if a warrior would have came up, they'd be like, "Oh, another one, next," and then heave ho, right? But because it's Pharaoh's daughter, you're like, well, this is a baby though. Like, what are we doing? She probably has no idea about the decree. She probably has no idea what that looks like on the day to day basis. Maybe aware of it, but not in a actual actionable like I'm engaged in this process.
It's something else that's kind of neat too is who is this being written by? This is being written by Moses,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the information is being told to Moses from the angel, right? And so this is the first piece of information that we're getting where it's about his life, right? About his life and on. So this is really cool. And I noticed that in the very beginning it says thy father. We see a switch here. So immediately it's not, this isn't a story about Moses. This is speaking to Moses about his life,
Right.
right? Giving him the details. So I find that really interesting. This is the only book that Moses claims to be the author of,
Mm-hmm.
right? So Or I should say, let me rephrase it. This is the only book where the author claims to be Moses.
Mm-hmm. I was going back and looking at the Exodus account on this, so it was interesting. Going back to your thought, though, Kyle, with the, why this one child? Well, we know this is God's plan. So, but and just because the Pharaoh himself has made his decree, doesn't mean everybody's really on board with it. They just have to do what he's saying. Like even like his own people, maybe like we're murdering all these little babies. But you have to follow the decree, and then you got the daughter of Pharaoh who's bathing and hears, something about when a woman hears a baby cry and it draws them to it. And so the father knew exactly what he was doing. He's like, the very person who's causing all this harm, I'm going to literally go, into his household and bring this child into his household. And not only am I going to bring it into his household, this child's going to be taken care of. He's going to be educated. I mean, he's going to have all the best of everything. And so, again, it's thank God that that Moses, was recovered out of the water and everything like that. And going back to where we are with the Hebrew people, we go to Exodus. The sovereign is having this conversation. The new Pharaoh's having this conversation, and it says, chapter 1, verse 7. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased very much, multiplied and became very strong, and the land was filled with them. So they're and this is what we talked about in the last recording. Like, I bet they just started, their population was just like they were exploding. It's exactly what Exodus says. It says, then a new sovereign arose over Mitzrayim who did not know Joseph. She's like, Joseph, I don't know. So who are these people in the land? And he said to his people, see, the people of the children of Israel are more stronger than we. Come, let us act wisely towards them, lest they increase, and it shall be when fighting befalls us, they shall join our enemies to fight against us and shall go up out of the land. And so they set slave masters over them to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh supply cities of Pithom and Ramesses. And the more they afflicted them, the more they increased. So this is the thing, is like, the more you did to God's people, God's like, hey, don't worry about this, because you're going to be multiplying like crazy. So the more they afflicted them, the more they increased and grew, and they were in dread of the children of Israel. And it says in the Mitzrayites, verse 13, made the children of Israel serve with them harshness, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all kinds of work in the field. All their work which they made them do was with harshness. Then the sovereign of Mitzrayim spoke to the Hebrew midwives, of whom the name was Shiphrah, and the name of the other was Puah, and said, when you deliver the Hebrew women, see them on the birth stool. If it is a son, you shall put him to death, and if it is a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared Elohim, which I really love that. I love this part of the story. I love the fact that they're like, I hear what you're saying, but it's awesome the fact that they still knew who Elohim was. So as much as we talked about there was probably some assimilation that was taking place here, there was still a fear of, I know who these people are. And it says, but the midwives feared Elohim and did not do as the sovereign of Mitzrayim commanded them, and kept the male children alive. So the sovereign of Mitzrayim called for the midwives and said to them, why have you done this? Keep and kept the male children alive. And the midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Mitzrayim women, for they are lively and give birth before the midwife comes to them. Can you? You're like, it's out of our hands, bro. By the time we get there, they're already holding the baby. It's crazy, the amount that these people are multiplying and thriving here. And so at that point, that's when Pharaoh's like, okay, I've had enough of all of this. Throw him in the river. And this brings us to the story of Moshe, with his mother hiding him. And man, I'm gonna tell you what, after having now 5 grandchildren, raising 3 children of my own, we've been there. Kyle, you're there right now with you. Right now she's in the other room. If she starts crying, you're going to hear it. And by the way, when a child really starts going, everybody hears it. Can you imagine mom hiding a baby for 3 months and going, hey, what was that noise? Oh, it was nothing. It was nothing. Oh, is that a boy? Oh no, it's nothing to see here, I guess. But
Mating season with
can you imagine
alligators.
the nerves, the mom's nerves the whole time are going, every time he cries, every time he weeps, every time there's something, it's always looking over your shoulder. It's always like, it was almost at that point where guys like, don't worry about this. This is exactly what you're going to,
Mm-hmm.
and he's going to be taken care of. And by the way, mom, you're going to be the one taking care of him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
And
one
get
of the
paid to
best
do it.
parts of the story is mom gets to be a part of it.
Right.
And so it's the whole story. This is a beautiful story, and you understand later on the connection with Miriam and Moshe being the older sister, and that when we get to the part in the story of Moses when he's having his moment, I call it the Moses meltdown, but his sister just died. His sister was the world to him. His sister, he knew that she was literally behind the scenes the whole time, the go between person, making sure he was taking little brother was taken care of. So when we get later in the story, when he blows up and he strikes a rock instead of speaking to it, we have to remember the his sister he loved very much had just passed away. And so we see this strong bond between him and his sister Miriam right off the rip. We see that he keep that bond with his mother, and then we'll let the rest of the story play out from there with the life of Moses.
Good stuff.
Yeah, that was a lot of context to bring in there. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like at the end of verse 1 here, it says, "And it was the time of tribulation for the children of Israel." So this wasn't isolated. This wasn't just Moses. This wasn't just Aaron and an isolated group. It says, okay, children of Israel, everybody, this was the time of tribulation.
Mm-hmm.
This is what was kind of spoken about, and it's always been the case. Do this, follow my ways, stay in covenant with me, and you will be blessed. Now, all the other good things. And it doesn't say that you will forever be protected and nothing bad will ever come to you. But you can kind of see that things aren't going as well as they were. That's why when they leave the land, they're still clamoring to go back. They've forgotten that they're not even from Egypt. They've forgotten they're not Goshenites. They're Israelites. They have a land. They have a place to go, and they're displaced temporarily. And so like when it talks about that time of tribulation, it's always been an interesting thought process of, all right, when things get bad, what do you do? How do you react? And um, with Pharaoh's decision to say, all the male children, well, we see this story play out multiple times throughout scripture. We see that again with Yeshua. They're like, hey, go get all the boys. I'm gonna figure this out because we're not having it. And little did Pharaoh know there was a Moses. He didn't know there was such thing as a Moses. He just knew, all right, well, if I can get rid of the males, I can start to slow down this process. And I think he kind of had a little bit of a inferiority complex. He loses the battle to Canaan and he sees this great nation inside of his own borders. He's like, I don't know what to do, but take it out on them. And the Israelites did nothing wrong. They built the cities for him. They lived there. They took care of the land. They seemed like they would have been very symbiotic, not in any kind of opposition. But once Pharaoh got it in his mind that, well, if I can't attack the strong guy, then I'll attack the weak guy. He wanted to win something, is what it seems like. And just the fact that it called it tribulation just was very interesting. There's going to be a time, but he's going to carry you through. There's going to be a back end to the story.
Yeah, I had that. I had that sentence or that part of that sentence highlighted as well, and I did a quick little search too. So in the canon, the word tribulation is mentioned 22 times in the King James. This is referencing tribulation. The term great tribulation is only mentioned 3 times. That's in Matthew 24, Revelation 2, and Revelation 7. Those are the only 3 times that great tribulation is mentioned. So this, where all of the male children are being done away with, is just considered tribulation. If that's any inkling of an idea as to what is to come in the future, it's going to be rough. It's going to be real bad. So, yeah. I'm not a pre-tribulation rapture believer, but, I wouldn't be opposed to the idea. You know what I'm saying?
Would you consider some of the stuff that happened to Egypt to be in the category or start working toward the category of great tribulation with all the plagues and obviously just your opinion?
I think that is. I think that it is absolutely. That was great tribulation on a very specific group of people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when we hear the term great tribulation in the canon, it's referenced as something that has a time that has never been seen before.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this is going to be worse than anything that has ever happened. And this is for everybody, not just Egypt. Right. This is going to be for the entire earth. So yeah, I mean, I'd say maybe a foreshadowing,
Mm-hmm.
a hint, but definitely not a tit for tat. Not a. This is exactly what it's going to look like, because I think it's going to be much worse, to be perfectly honest with you. So
Oh yeah, well it has to be. I mean, it says a third of the world. So, what about you, Joe? Do you think that's kind of in that category of tribulation, great tribulation?
Yeah, I agree with Kyle that once we're there, that it's gonna be rough. I don't think that we get magically pulled away anywhere. I think we're going to live through whatever's coming, but I also believe our Heavenly Father has set aside protection for those. Maybe not everybody, I don't know, but it's just when the Bible uses terms like that of great tribulation, it's just, I think tribulation here in the microcosm of what's happening in Goshen and Egypt. Then you look at great tribulation as what's going to be worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be just affecting a localized group here. It's going to be everybody. It's kind of like what we went through about 4 years ago. It didn't matter if you lived in a grass hut or you lived in the city or in the suburbs. Everybody was affected.
yeah.
100%. So that's what I look at. The Great Tribulation is one of those things where everybody is being affected one way or another.
And there won't be any place to hide. So
Right.
Mm-mm.
So what about 4? I thought this
Comes
was
after 3.
yeah. I thought this was interesting. Covered it with pitch and asphalt. Is that an
They did
accurate
road work back
translation?
then.
Yeah, I know, right? Is that an accurate translation? I mean, I know pitch is more of a reference to like tar or whatever, and I know
Mhm.
tar and stuff can be used with asphalt. Is that just 2 different ways of saying the same thing, or what are we dealing with here? Because I doubt they're covering it with rocks. You know,
That's a good question. I mean, other than if the children of Israel are laying the roads as well while they're there.
maybe so. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely
Moshe's daddy was a road maker.
now it's definitely interesting because so much of this, the way it's translated, is in like old English and using old words we don't use anymore,
Mhm.
and then it's like asphalt, something that we've had recently. And you're like, huh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Like, so I wonder if it's is that a callback to something? It's a word that's been around and we've only known it in modernity, or But I mean, I'm guessing it was just some way to fully seal this water basket arc thing, and so
Yeah.
that's why I'm glad we have context. We have the canon to kind of bounce this off of, and we know that if you're in the water for 7 days, anybody's going to struggle to survive. The waters in the rivers aren't the cleanest water. There's bugs, there's parasites, there's bacteria, there's leeches, different animals and stuff like that. So I'm guessing it's just really making home the point that this thing was solid and it wasn't going to go floating down the river by accident. It wasn't going to meet like those, Disney cartoons where it always falls off the waterfall no matter what. Even if you're in not
Mhm.
waterfall land, there's always white water and waterfalls. So I think this is just, really giving us that indicator that it's solid. They did a good job. But yeah, where's that word
Yeah.
come from? Unless it's got some, etymology that I'm unaware of. That's pretty funny.
Kyle's looking it up right now.
I am. So asphalt is a semi-solid form of petroleum. It has few basic ingredients, including a mixture of crushed stone, gravel, sand, and a material called bitumen. Bitumen is a sticky black byproduct of petroleum that holds the aggregate together. So I'm going to assume that it's probably not the asphalt that's being referenced here is probably not including the crushed stone, but all the other stuff, I'm guessing. So
Well, if they wanted
Right.
to weigh it down so it, kind of set in the bank and it didn't go anywhere.
maybe so, maybe so. I don't know. But either way, like the That's neat to kind of speculate on what that is, but man, the amount of faith that it took for somebody to put their child in a basket and here, let's go down the river during this time frame in history of what's going on around them. And for goodness sakes, the Nile, are you kidding me?
Right.
Crocodiles, snakes, I mean, wild animals, you name it, whatever.
Stuff
in the water. And they're like, nope, we're going to trust the Father.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I think they believed in the process of trust but verify, because they definitely sent Miriam to go check. They're like, hey, we trust you. Hey, Miriam, just keep an eyeball on it. Just every once in a while, swing by, do this with the birds. All right. Now
right.
you go on about your business.
Jonathan, what else you got? You were about to change the subject a second ago.
Yeah. So when we look at the time with Pharaoh, right? So this is the Pharaoh that no longer knew Joseph, and I think that's important to remember, that this story has fully matured out of the Joseph scenario. I think that's why it starts off and it's like, okay, now the angel of presence. Hey, Moses, I'm talking about you now. That story, we've closed that chapter literally and figuratively. Now let's look at from you forward. And yeah, you want to know how you got here, because I'm sure Moses was like, yeah, it was kind of interesting. I remember about the whole thing, like I'm Hebrew, but then I grew up in the palace. Like, what's that all about? And when you look at that time period, it's 7 months. That's a long time. That wasn't like, okay, this was one bad week, and the Pharaoh kind of lost his mind. It's 7 months. This is their new way of life. If you're having boys, they're going in the water. That's just what it is. So, when I talk about tribulation, that's a tough time to be alive when you're still having children, because one, there's no birth control, and two, they were still following the command is be fruitful and multiply, and they were doing a good job at it apparently. And then all of a sudden it doesn't matter what you do, someone else is in control of your family dynamic, someone else is in control of your family lifestyle, and that's a tough spot to be in. I couldn't imagine where you've lost autonomy over your own family unit, and the results are nothing but bad. There's not a positive in here somewhere. There's not like a silver lining. Even with Moses, this is like a miracle baby. Essentially, it's a baby that shouldn't have been in a scenario that it shouldn't have worked in a way that only God could have moved. And that's why I know this is in here. Is how do we give credit to God and God alone? And that's the biggest takeaway from that is, yep, this was mission impossible, literally. And somehow Moses ends up in the highest position from the water. This wasn't even a baby that's supposed to make it back then. And that it just kind of blows my mind when you really look at how our world's very much in that place, where we don't, some of the future doesn't get to make it. And these 1 in a million scenarios is a Moses. These are people that contribute to society, people with children with eternal souls that have an opportunity to make a decision for Christ and live out a full and healthy lifestyle. And because somebody else's decision that's not their own makes a decision for them, and they don't get to live that out. And you see Moses, again, the impossible baby. Maybe he had a little bit something wrong with him, whatever was issue with his speech. Maybe it was just the foreign language and trying to deal with Egyptian and Hebrew. Maybe he had a speech impediment. Who really knows? But even with his flaws, he was still a man of God who was able to redeem himself and achieve super dude Bible status.
Good stuff. All right, well, let's go ahead and get going in verse 7.
All right, let's do it. And thy sister said unto her, shall I go and call unto thee one of the Hebrew women to nurse and suckle this babe for thee? And she said unto her, go. And she went and called thy mother, Jochebed. She gave her wages, and she nursed thee. And afterwards, when thou wast grown up, they brought thee unto the daughter of Pharaoh, and thou didst become her son. And Amram thy father taught thee writing, and after thou hast completed 3 weeks, they brought thee into the royal court. And thou wast 3 weeks of years at court until the time when thou didst go forth from the royal court, and didst see an Egyptian smiting thy friend, who was of the children of Israel, and thou didst slay him and hide him in the sand. And on the second day thou didst find 2 of the children of Israel striving together, and thou didst say to him who was doing the wrong, why doest thou smite thy brother? And he was angry and indignant, and said, Who made thee a prince, a judge over us? Thinkest thou to kill me as thou killest the Egyptian yesterday? And thou didst fear and flee on account of these words.
Didst, huh?
And
Yeah,
and the
killed
King
that.
of James, this getting on my nerves. Good night.
I'm trying to understand.
Oh boy.
Oh, good stuff. Okay, so let's see. In verse 10, it says 3 weeks of years. So he was 21
Yeah.
when he did that. Okay. Does the canon tell us that?
We can find out. I don't think it gives us a year. I don't think
I
it
don't
tells
think we get a
how old he was.
date.
Well, again, just one of those things. It's really interesting how we get these additional details, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to line up. I'm positive it's going to line up, with all the other things once we are able to get dates and times and that sort of stuff. So we can check it real quick, though. We'll be right back after a brief message. And we're back.
Yep. And so anyway, guys, in Exodus chapter 2, in verse 11, it says, And in those days it came to be when Moshe was grown. So it doesn't give us a date or an age like Jubilees does. But, it kind of makes sense, because if Jubilees is telling us he's basically 21 years old, that would be considered to be a grown man at that time as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. And he would have had to have been grown to get engaged in a civil dispute and accidentally kill somebody. You're not 12 years old out there like, hey, you guys stop fighting. They would have just pushed him down and said, go away, kid.
Right.
So, he was adult enough to be in that scenario.
Right. I don't know. I don't know why. I kind of had it in my mind that he was older. Like, I'm thinking a 30 or 40-year-old man, but probably because our example of Moses that we see is the Charlton Heston. Am I saying that right? Charlton Heston? Okay.
Yeah.
I always want to say Charleston for some reason.
Not Charleston. That's where I live at, but Charleston.
Charlton Heston, is the older guy, and we always think about the Moses with the white beard and all that stuff. So I don't know. We just kind of have it in our minds that this is an old dude doing this stuff. And at this point, at least, he's 21. So
right.
Good stuff.
Yeah. And what this section kind of gives us too, when we start from verse 7 there, it's, the whole family's in on this situation. And I kind of, even in my own head, reading through this so many times, you don't realize how much involvement it is. So the mom has the baby, feeding the baby on the side. Then the sister's like, hey, I know a lady that could feed the baby.
Mm-hmm.
How about we do this? And so then that means that this family was at least had some respect. They're able to have this conversation. Like, these aren't just the random peasants that are, down on block 900. They're talking to Pharaoh's daughter. How? Like, when is this conversation allowed to happen? So they're not nobodies. They at least have to have some credibility, some prominence, which I didn't really ever consider. But go figure, they're all of them end up playing a role. So the daughter is the one kind of broaching the conversation. The mom's feeding the baby and getting paid to do so. So she's getting paid to feed her own baby. I wish I could be in this scenario. I mean, in my family, not me personally, and try to let that work out. Like, I'm getting paid to do something I have to do anyway. That, like, in any other scenario, I would have had to do this for free. But in this scenario, I get to do it for wages. Again, like when God puts his finger on something, it's blessed, and then some more blessed. Then he gets to go back home to learn how to read and write. He wasn't learning to read and write Egyptian. He's learning how to read and write Hebrew because he's learning from his dad. So I thought that was also interesting. At least that's my perspective. I mean, maybe Amram was teaching him hieroglyphics, but I'm guessing he's teaching them the language of the people. So he's getting like the full family treatment from mom, dad, and sister. All of them were involved and engaged. Whatever language he was learning, they were all involved in his life as not his family. But yet he still got to live and have the full family experience and the little side, enjoyment time in Egypt.
Well, two things. One, don't be so hard on yourself. I think you'd make a great mother, Jonathan.
Not this guy.
Also, on the side here, there's a little note I thought I would bring up. It said, Contrast Acts 7:22, where it says Moses was taught by Egyptians, but Moses' father also taught him Hebrew. So he was taught by both. So very learned.
So if that's the case, Cal, that kind of takes away any speculation that the reason why Aaron had to be with him was to be basically an interpreter, or to speak on his behalf, because some people may believe, well, he grew up completely Egyptian, so maybe he didn't understand Hebrew. And then when he's having this conversation with Abba, and he's like, your brother's on the way, so I'm not very good at speaking. I'm not very good. It was some people have speculated, well, maybe he couldn't speak the language of Hebrew, so he was nervous about approaching him. But according to this, if his father taught him Hebrew, then that's completely out of the way. Then that's not even an option.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that, if he's extremely well versed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it says his father also taught him Hebrew. We don't know to what degree. Like, for example, I know some folks that speak Spanish, right? They're fluent. They can speak Spanish, and I can pick up on enough words to get the overall gist of what they're saying. And I can speak enough words in Spanish where I can kind of sometimes, depending on what the conversation is about, sometimes share my thoughts, at least to a degree where they can figure out what I'm saying. But can I speak, read, or write Spanish? No. A few words here and there, right? So there's basic premises, there's basic concepts, there's basic parts of the language, I guess, that I can understand, speak, and all that kind of stuff, or even spell. But to be able to do so fluently, like, there's no way. Like, I wouldn't be able to stand up in front of a crowd of Spanish speaking people and share anything with them. That it just would not go well. So I don't know. I don't know what is being said here. If we had something to give us more understanding as to the depth of his learning, maybe so. But
I would say this, though: the conversation he's having with the two guys that he later, he's having a pretty fluent conversation with them.
Yeah,
but
it's definitely an interesting verse because it just says he taught him writing. Writing is totally different than speech and knowledge of the language. So I wonder if it was just like an early precursor. And then, Kyle, to your point, kind of maybe it was this is your second language anyway. You're almost never as proficient with your second language as you are as your primary language. But again, it's all speculation. There's nothing in here that tells us any way, shape, or form. But we do know some facts. So some facts are, like Joe was saying, he was talking to both sides. He was able to say, "Let my people go to in Egyptian." And then also go talk to the people and say, "Follow me." And I'm about to do some stuff. He also was on the mountain writing all this stuff down. He was also taking care of business along the way. So there had to have been some, he's writing the 10 Commandments because God was like, "I'm not doing that again. This it's your turn. Well, you broke it. Well, you do it." And then now he's writing this whole book of Jubilees, and whatever that book, if it's either this book or some other book that he puts on the side of the ark as a testimony against them, then he's writing all that stuff in native Hebrew, and it might not even be the same Hebrew we have today. So who knows what he was writing exactly? But we know that whatever he did receive, he got it from his dad, and that's awesome. It wasn't he didn't have to learn from some, scholar mystic dude who's got an eagle hat on or something. He learned it from his dad, and he didn't have to, and he got to ingratiate himself in some of the culture without growing up in it. So whenever he's talking to the people, he's like, "I know a lot about you guys. Well, I was raised here a little bit. I reared here. Like, why do I know? Why does this feel so comfortable to me? You know what I mean? Like, you can't get away from your upbringing. It's like there was like this weird call. It seems like, because he's like, "Well, you guys got to stop fighting." Why? I don't know you guys. You're just the slaves. Like, I don't care. But something about it kept pulling him back to it. And obviously, there's the Holy Spirit involved in all of that. But he's like, "Hey, I can understand what you guys are saying. Why are you fighting? Hey, I can talk with you. We all kind of look alike." You know what I mean? I think there was just always this weird background thought process that was like, "I don't know what to do with this, but I'm going to keep thinking about it."
Yeah. Okay, what about this? Verse 10. It says, where we're talking about him slaying the dude. You went forth from the royal court and saw the Egyptian smiting your friend, who was of the children of Israel, and slayed him. Okay. So he's got a friend, he's got a buddy, he's got a pal that's of the children of Israel. So he's not, we have this idea again with like the movie, the Ten Commandments, like he's just an Egyptian dude. He's a Hebrew dude that's raised as an Egyptian. And then all of a sudden he has a wake up call and he's like, all right, I'm going to go talk to the Israelites now.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I mean, he has a friend.
Right.
He's interacting with these people. Like I'm guessing he knew who his dad was. I'm guessing he knew who his mom and his sister was,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Maybe they didn't know the relation, but he knew them.
He knew them, whether he knew the relation or not. Correct.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, just interesting.
He's like, man, I grew up playing pickup sticks and matzo ball pool with you. You know what I mean? This is my friend.
It's so funny, Joe. You've brought up the point several times about how people will watch that show, The Chosen, and they'll start mentioning things as if they're facts, as if they're biblical, as if they're scriptural.
Start quoting it.
Yeah, and I mean, good gracious, how much of that is so deeply ingrained in us that we still have to get rid of,
Yeah.
The whole,
or even the Prince of Egypt cartoon. And I've seen that 20 times at least.
Hey, they call it programming for a reason, right?
Yeah, now I would say on that as well, with his interaction with his people and having a friend that's an Israelite. This is where, and this is me, I'm gonna add into the story, just my thoughts, is that this is where I believe that the closeness of him and Miriam come into play. Is that she's not only is she was there to keep the birds off of him while he was in the water to protect him. She's always been there to protect Moses. She's always been there to be whatever it is she can be for Moses. And so I think that there was some grounding probably that took place with her being in his life, and that there was probably some really good influence on top of that. And Miriam being able to come to him and say, hey, by the way, I don't know if you know this or not, but we're getting like really taxed hard out here. There's a burden placed on us that it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost to the point where when you see Moshe's walking out there, and while this is happening, he sees, oh, there's one of my best friends getting beat up or whatever's happening to him. Yeah, it could have caused something just to develop inside of him. He's like, no, this is wrong. Of course, he kills the guy, buries him in the sand, kind of like, nothing to see here. But this is something I've always said as well. Be careful because somebody's always watching. And so apparently there were some other guys who saw exactly what he did, all the way to the burying of the body in the sand. They're like, well, who are you? Are you our prince? Are you our judge? You going to do to us what you did to that other guy? Yeah, we saw that. We can get you in trouble for that. You know this, right? So, yeah.
Well, and I like that Moses' response in 12 was he was angry and indignant, it's like there's a humanity side to him where he's like, hey, I made a mistake yesterday. Like, this is still fresh. I've got to live with the consequences that I just did, but it was on your behalf. Like, I was out here trying to save you. And then I turn around and see you guys fighting with each other. Are you kidding me? Like, he's like frustrated with the scenario. He's like, how can I fix you if you are broken? You know what I mean? And I think this is Moses' first like insight, or the first time we get some insight on Moses' mentality of like, what's wrong with you people? He's like, I don't get it. And the whole time, like I said, stop dying. I'm trying to save you. That was the whole story of Israel leaving. He's like, every time I turn around, you're doing something dumb. You're asking for dumb stuff. You're trying to go the wrong way. You're fighting battles without the spirit. You're not following the cloud. Like, what are you literally doing? So I think here he said, I went to bat for you. I literally, accidentally, and I mean, whether it was an accident or not, I don't know. But somebody ended up dead because I was trying to save you. And then I turn around and now you're going to fight each other. Like, you've got to be kidding. So, I like his answer. He was like a little bit angry, a little bit indignant. Like, man, what's going on? Like, why are you fighting each other? And this is a really early indicator of like, the people weren't all happy go lucky themselves. They were still dealing with a lot of stuff. They still had a lot of internal strife and struggle. I'm sure there was a few of the old people that were like, we've got to keep the ways of Joseph. We got to get back to when there was no Satan. And then you got the new kids on the block. Hey man, they're feeding us 3 square. I mean, yeah, we got our backs are striped up, but we're getting fed every day. So let's not fight the system. Let's not make it any worse. So, and you always got those people that are like, let's just get along to get along, and let's just create a little unity here, and it'll all work itself out on the back end. And Moses was like, I bet you it won't.
Well, what's funny too there as well, Jonathan, is the fact that there's a little bit of foreshadowing here when they said, "Who made thee prince and judge over us?"
Right.
And it's like, well, little did you know.
Then he shows up. He's like, oh,
Little did you know. It's funny. I wonder if these guys were there when they later down the road and they're leaving. Moses shows back up, goes, surprise, surprise.
Right. There's the caravan going by. And they look at him. He goes,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah. You go ahead. No, I know. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a mic drop, then it'd be a staff drop. Like,
So I got a question. So, okay, first question is Moses ever referred to as a prince?
I think so.
Is that one of those Prince of Egypt things that we just kind of think of him like that? But is he ever actually called that?
Well, we can come back from another station break and go look that up.
All right. Take some time to view our sponsors, guys. We'll be right back. And we're back. Okay. So what we find out, Joe?
Know that he was never called a prince in the Bible. I'll just read this real quick. It says, Moses was not a prince in the Bible, but he was raised in the Egyptian royal court. The Bible describes Moses as the adopted son of an Egyptian princess, the Pharaoh's daughter. She basically goes on to say that she raised him. And then it goes into a little explanation of where we were talking about earlier about the cartoon from DreamWorks. The animated film, The Prince of Egypt, Moses is portrayed as a prince who is raised alongside Ramesses. So, again, it goes back into, outside influences and having to separate between, what the Bible's saying and what, other people's interpretation is.
Yeah. And so with that, I find this statement to be a lot more, it makes a lot more sense. Who made thee a prince and judge over us? So, but we know he was of the royal court. So he's not bloodline. So he's adopted in. So he's technically not a prince. And if he's speaking both languages and he's wearing a signet ring or whatever it is it maybe he's being groomed or raised to be an ambassador between the two nations?
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of makes me go down that trail there is Yeshua was a prophet likened unto Moses, right? Okay. And there's many ways we can do that correlation and comparison as far as, freedom and, promised land and all that kind of stuff. But what about being amongst the enemy and gathering his people and almost being kind of what I potentially see Moses being here, being like an ambassador type thing, a go-between for the two nations? I don't know. Y'all have any thoughts on that whatsoever?
Yeah, I never really put the category of ambassador, but that does bring an interesting point. He definitely would have the most connection from one to the other, especially in that time, and I wonder if that's why he was out there with them. Like, what was he doing out there where the slaves were at? Why was he over there dealing with people? Like, it's almost like you're in charge of all the taskmasters, like, hey, go make sure that everything's smooth between us and them. Make sure the bricks are getting, 400 per day or whatever. So if he is involved in that scenario, he's like, hey, you speak Hebrew, you're one of them. Who better to do that job? So yeah, it's just an interesting take for sure.
Okay. If you guys have anything on that, please let us know. I'd be curious to know more about that. But that kind of, it makes sense. It's again speculation and whatnot, but it makes sense that would be the case. So he's never actually called a prince. And then these people have the guts to say this to him, because if he is a prince, if he really is high ranking like that, then he can do what he wants. And there ain't no way these dudes would have had the nerve to say something like that to him. Who made you a prince and judge over us? Are you kidding me? If he was, he could have handled business right then,
Right.
So, but it says, and you did fear and flee on account of these words.
Right.
So, whatever it was they said, what it was that they said to him made him go, oh, I messed up.
Right.
So,
Yeah, well, there in 12, the one thing that seems messed up is that word kilst. Like, I would like anybody to practice that and spell that out for me correct. Can anybody say that correctly at home? Like, I just want you to, for the rest of the day, kilst. Somehow you have to get all those consonants in there. One more?
Killed.
Kilts.
Oh man, I said it right the first time, and now I can't do it again. My tongue don't want to do that.
It's too many. Joe, I'm proud of you for getting through that and reading it the first time.
It was hard. I appreciate it. It was hard for reading up, man.
I keep looking over it. I'm like, I just can't say
it
that.
It is interesting though that we're talking about this. Sorry, I hit my mic. It is interesting though that I don't know. My brain's trying to wrap back around this thought of, because the guy that Moses is speaking to, and it says that fellow, he was the one that was angry and indignant and said, "Who made thee a prince and judge over us?" It's just interesting, huh? That that terminology, because if Moses is brought up in the courts of Pharaoh, there's a level of protection. There's a level of I don't know the right words how to say it. He actually has like clout behind him. He's got substance, there. I mean, to be, even whether or not he was ever called a true prince or not by Egypt, the fact that you were being raised in Pharaoh's house with Pharaoh's daughter, being taught by all the best teachers, I'm sure, being taught all the best of everything, these men should actually recognize who he is, I would think. Don't you guys think that? What do you think they would recognize Moshe, or do you think that it was he just lived in the house of Pharaoh but didn't have any clout at all? So for this man to be indignant to say those words, to say, "And who has made thee a prince and judge over us?"
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, there's definitely new generation. There's going to be a degree of separation. Like, I've never seen the president of the nation that we live in ever, any of them. And so, they could sneak by, and I mean, unless they were directly in my face, I wouldn't know any better. But we actually have TV and pictures everywhere. They don't have TV or pictures. So it's very possible they were like, we know of a guy, and we know that big statue looks like him. But how often do you see it unless there's some random parade and they're covered in stuff? So I wonder if there was just a degree of separation, and then what they see is somebody that looks like them out here telling them what to do. They're like, "Who are you to tell us what to do? You look like my brother Steve over here, Or I guess they didn't have Steve back then, but
you just got prettier clothes.
that is interesting. Like I said, there's something in that, Joe, and I'm glad you kind of pulled that out, because there's a something there that's like, why, what's up with your attitude?
Just to say those words, just like,
who are you talking to?
Yeah. I mean, they had to have felt comfortable enough to say that, So, I'm with y'all on that. I don't know, but
let's go watch the Prince of Egypt and figure it out.
There you go. That should tell us all the truth we need, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, there's something, and I don't know, my brain just won't let it go, because there's something about that the wording of that person used. It's almost like, I'm going to go tell on you, or I'm going to ruin the rest of your life because I saw what you did. I don't know. There's something there, because he says, "Who made thee a prince and judge over us? Thinkest thou to kill me as thou killedst the Egyptian yesterday?" So I wonder if there was a level of jealousy there for him. They know he's a Hebrew, but he's raised, and he's raised with the best. He's not suffering with his brothers.
What makes you better than us?
Right.
Yeah.
What makes you better than us? Because you're not out here having to bake bricks, and you're not doing all this other stuff. And it's like, and you have the audacity to step down from your ivory tower to come down here to see us. We saw what you did, and so there's something.
And my guess is they're older than him too.
Yeah, more likely.
Because everybody his age pretty much got wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, you're right. You know, another point is I wonder if that's why that kind of mentality, attitude carries over into the wilderness. Every time Moses says something, they treat him like he's just regular dude, you know, and don't go over there. And they're like, no, we're going to go over there. Hey, the spirit didn't move. Don't go attack. They're like, shut up, Moses. We're going to go attack. Like sometimes it's almost like Moses is speaking literally on behalf of the Lord. And they're just like, we're not listening to you. And I know it's part of their hard headedness. He calls them stiff necked.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have their own attributes that they have to carry out. But I do wonder maybe if that, you know, Moses is one, he's comes in the picture kind of awkwardly at the beginning, then leaves
Mm-hmm.
for like a good chunk of time, then comes back and is like, oh, by the way, I'm in charge. And they're like,
Yeah. Well, when he
you weren't in
comes
charge
back,
the first time.
yeah, he's gone for 40 years. So when he comes back, he's already like about 61, 62 years old.
Right.
So again, he's, you know, time had passed, but you know, I'm sure there's still people there who remember who he is.
Yeah.
So I have another thought. So it says that Aaron was 3 years older than his brother Moses. Okay. And Aaron probably had to deal with some of the same hardships that the other guys had to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's why Moses wasn't such a good speaker. It's because they didn't want to listen to him. You hadn't been through what we've been through. You think you know us. Da 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 da. You know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's this same attitude that all the other Israelites had. Or maybe it's because of this situation here where he didn't feel like he could speak to the nation.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
I don't know.
his credibility was shot from the beginning, in his own head at least.
I mean, we already know that he didn't feel like he was worthy to do that in the first place.
Right.
So maybe that's why he isn't well spoken. Maybe that's not a great translation about him being well spoken. Maybe he was very well educated in Hebrew and Egyptian. Maybe it was simply one of those things where he didn't feel like he could communicate properly because he hadn't been through what they've been through and done what they've done and lived like they lived.
Mm-hmm.
He got to live the good life while they were struggling. I don't know.
His struggle came later. Well, and all those 40 years and all the time after that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So
he earned his.
I don't know. Just another point to ponder there, I guess. Interesting. Huh.
Will we ever know?
I know, right? Well, I got something I thought I would share with you guys. So I pulled this up over here because I don't know. It just kind of stood out to me. The mother's name was, I'm just going to say Jochebed, Joshbed, whatever. I don't know.
Well, it's probably Yochebed.
Yeah. Yohebed,
I like that.
something like that.
Well, we know there was no J, so it was a Y sounding.
Well, this makes even more sense then. So let me read this. The name Yochebed continues to resonate strongly with religious communities as it symbolizes the everlasting bond between humanity and the divine. And also says, as far as the meaning of the name, it says Yochebed is a beautiful biblical name derived from the Hebrew Yochewed. I'm just gonna
perfect
something like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Hey man, you speak that about as well as you do your Spanish. So
what it means is Yahweh is glory or God is glory.
Awesome.
So how cool is that?
Yeah. So this is a really short chapter, which is interesting because this is like, again, one of the most prominent characters in the scriptures. And, you know, we learn the life of Abraham and Jacob, and they have these huge long stories of their upbringing and all their struggles and the good and the bad and the indifferent and all their time. And here we're seeing the angel actually having a conversation, of course, you know, who's giving him all this information, but he's like, hey, I'm like Kyle brought up, I'm talking to you. Like, this is about you, and I'm talking to you because this is you. And so I wonder if, you know, Moses lights up a little bit as he's writing this on the mountain, like, oh, hey, a little autobiography time. I wonder what happened, you know. And so he's explaining through this process, and it's super short. You know, I'm very surprised that, you know, we're not getting that same level of detail. But it seems as though, hey, your time in Egypt was not important. That was not the priority. That was not what we really want to have written down here. Yes, that's what made you who you are, and it put you in the position to do the things you did. But that's not the focus. The focus is on Israel, the Hebrews, and your interaction with them. So we're going to kind of fast forward through that part of your life. We're going to get your upbringing. Look how you were miraculously saved. Look how your mom, your sister, your brother, your dad, they were all involved in your life, even though you had a separate mission and it was different than everybody else's and you didn't know it and you were being prepared for such a time as this. And he's like, what time is this? Yeah, oh, you're writing it down right now. This book that you're writing, this event that's going on, this booming voice from the sky, yeah, that stuff. All that was to set you up for this time. Now your goal is to make it to the promised land. And the angel of the presence is like, good luck out there. But when he's writing this stuff, I wonder how Moses feels when he's getting a little bit of his information revealed. The angels and the Father know every detail. Moses is like, oh, you knew about that? Oh, you knew about that? Oh, you knew that I buried him in the sand? I thought I got away with that. Like I thought just those two guys saw that. And he's like, no, write it down. I saw it. We were all there. And we were a little bit embarrassed for you. But hey, you got back on the horse and you kept riding. And I appreciate it. And, now you're here. So we get this whole process and we see that, no life is unimportant. No scenario God's not involved in intimately. Everybody has a purpose and a reason to be who they are. And Moses had a huge reason, and his story was crazy to start off with. He literally had to survive a basket in the water just to get to where he was. But look how God moved in his life throughout the whole story. And when we look at the final process, every detail mattered. And I think that's, for me, the biggest takeaway is it's such a short chapter, but every detail mattered. Without one of those details, without learning that Hebrew, without getting nursed by his mom, without the birds being waved away from him. And so I just pray for you guys that, you have somebody in your life that's, you have these people in your life. You have somebody that's waving off the birds, somebody that's teaching you a little bit of something, somebody that's feeding you spiritually or physically, somebody who's providing for you. And then you're walking in the Father's will for your life. And then you have whatever version of the Moses story in your life, because it's going to be individual to you, that plays out exactly how it's supposed to.
Amen. And with that, we will see you next time for chapter 48 in the book of Jubilees. God bless.
Shalom.
Ciao.